Hey, did you know Long's Products is a family-owned janitorial supply with mops, brooms, trash bags, and they even have food service disposables, carry-out plates, and to-goes? Check us out.
So we are actually live at this moment. So everything we see, say, and do is broadcasting on our UrbanCast Facebook and YouTube pages at this moment. Since we got some folk on in there, Patrick, I'm gonna go ahead and do a good evening message. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jack with the UrbanCast, of course, and tonight we're gonna be tackling one of the most important issues facing our city, Alexandria, our utility bills. Now, this isn't just about the dollars and cents. This is about civic engagement. Civic engagement means neighbors asking questions, holding leaders accountable, and learning how decisions really affect our lives. Political engagement, on the other hand, happens during election, but civic engagement is what we do every day. And it's the only way we can solve problems and issues like this together. That's why we've invited Patrick Lacour, a utility finance expert and former director over at Cleco, to help us break down why bills are so high in Alexandria and what the Cure Commission is recommending and what can be done. So we got a series of questions that we're going to have. We want to encourage everyone that's with us tonight. Patrick has gracefully said he will entertain questions. So just drop them over in the comments and interrupt us as you see fit, and we'll stop our comments to try to get your stop our questioning to get your comments in. It should be fun. Make sure if you're out there, help spread the word, help educate the rest of the citizens of Alexandria by sharing and engaging in this post. You can hit that share button, like button, make the comments. With all of that being said, Patrick, tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
I'm currently a forensic accountant in town. I also do business valuations. So what is a forensic accountant? It's basically an accountant that's comfortable in court. I do a lot of expert witness work. I don't always get into courts. I help resolve disputes between people, but that's my bread and butter, what I do, that and business valuation. I was with Cleco up until 2007. So it's been a long time since I've been at Cleco. But what I'm going to talk about today are things that I know from my past with Cleco and from maintaining some contact with what goes on with the city of Alexandria. I mean, it's not as though it's an account for me, but I'm a resident and I know enough about the power industry to know some of these issues.
Okay. All right. So with that said, Patrick, let's just go ahead and dive right down into it. What the elephant in the room? Why are Alexandria utility bills so high, especially for residents who say they hardly use much electricity?
So and it's a long answer. I'll try to be brief. One, we do know, I have said for years that Alexandria is a city wrapped around a utility. I actually like that we have the utility, but the utility does not exist by itself. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not just a utility. It's a cookie jar. It's a subsidy fund for the rest of the city. And so there are transfers, and they're all documented. That's not conspiracy theory. There are transfers that come out of the utility fund that plug gaps in the general fund. And so if you use electricity, and I'm speaking mainly about electricity today, but it's true of the entire utility system. If you use the city of Alexandria utilities, you're paying for other services. And that was included in this rates study report that was done by Delta Consultants.
Okay. The Cure Commission is recommending an increase. What's the real reasoning behind that, and what would happen if the city doesn't raise the rates?
I'll start with the last part first. It's a lot like your own personal finances, right? So if you don't have enough income, you tighten the belt. And I would say, because of the first thing that I explained, that because the utility subsidizes so much of the general fund, then the question becomes, if we're talking about raising utility rates, we need to have a conversation about the general fund. Is there fat that can be cut out of the general fund? Do we have, how many attorneys do we have on staff, right? Is there something else in the fund? Is it worth having? I don't know what, for instance, Winterfet costs, right? But is it worth having Winterfet to have more expensive utilities? Some people would say yes. I would say, if you want to have Winterfet, pay for it. And I'm just using Winterfet as an example. But again, the question of whether or not you would raise utility rates has to involve what the rest of the general fund looks like, because that's what the utility fund is being used to plug. So in the report that Delta, I think it's Delta Consulting or Delta Consultants, I thought it was a pretty good report. Okay, I'm not taking a lot of issue with the report. He and they were very upfront about these transfers, about these subsidies. I would like, one thing is, it would be nice to see what the rates look like without any subsidies and what the rates look like with subsidies. But the recommendation on the electrical side was that rates need to be increased to generate another $9.5 million in annual revenue. That's interesting, because last year, the last fiscal year that we have, which was the 24 fiscal year, and the city goes from May 1st. It's not a calendar year. They go from May. In the 24 fiscal year, the city transferred $10.9 million out of the utility fund to plug the general fund. Okay, so that's more than what this gentleman is recommending that they would raise the rates by. He's saying raise the rates by $9.5 million per year, but last year $10.3 million was transferred out from the utilities into the general fund.
Yeah. All right. Okay. And that's a good bit of money. I'm a little quiet there on it, but that's a great deal of money coming out of the utility fund itself and being used to plug different programs. And it's kind of hard to tell what those things are actually going to support as well. Were you able to, as you were studying it, could you tell any of the particular areas where the dollars were rolling into?
No, because it goes into the general fund. It doesn't go, it's not a one-to-one transfer to like a program, an individual program. So I did not spend any time and I didn't really have the time to break it down and figure out, or to, like I mentioned, Winterfet. I don't know what other things that we could, the rest of the budget that you can complain about, right? But again, if the discussion is to raise utility rates by a certain amount, then I would say there should be an equal discussion of, can you cut money out of the general fund? Because that amount of money is being, basically more money is being transferred out of the utility fund than they're saying that should be raised in rates. So is it worth it to have these other services? Now, look, one of the services is the bus system. In a municipality this size, you have to have a bus system. Can the bus system be paid for otherwise? Well, I think we may talk about that later. But overall, it's one thing that needs to come out of tonight is people need to understand that the utility fund is funding a lot of other services within the city, and for last year it was to the tune of $10.3 million.
That is true. Patrick, before you and I go further into the questions, you kind of had, when we talked earlier, we talked a little bit about, you brought up the subject about efficiencies over on, did we need to be doing certain things on the operational side of the city itself? But we also need to take a look at, maybe some of the operational things within the utility fund or system itself, and there are efficiencies that could possibly be, that could happen over there as well, right?
Yeah. So, and you were breaking up a little bit for me. Are you hearing me pretty good?
I hear you pretty good. Yeah.
You hear me pretty good? Okay.
Uh-huh.
So operationally, just take a step back. Utility operations, power cannot be stored, right? So there's probably a lot of people that are listening that know oil and gas operations, right? And so if you extract oil, you can put it in a tank. If you and that's storage. You can store that oil in a tank, that crude oil. If you refine crude into motor fuels, you can put gasoline in a tank and store it. You can put kerosene in a tank and store it. You cannot store power. It has to be generated and it has to be consumed at the same time. And because of that one-to-one match, that also does bring in efficiencies in that we've talked about. Line loss, I did see a lot of that comments about line loss. Line loss is a thing. For the city of Alexandria, line loss is not a big deal because it's just a distribution system. So when you have line loss is when you have big power transmission. Okay, transmission lines is where you're going to have line loss, and I think an average is maybe 3 to 5%. I heard people say 15%. That would be pretty. I'm not an engineer, okay, but 15% would be a lot. I think I saw some of that in the comments. I mean, an average of 5 and less than 5%. That's all part of the industry. That's not unique to Alexandria. And so when you're generating the power, you have to consume it. And they have something called load following. But before I get to load following, let's back it up and say all of these rates depend on what fuel mix, what generation you're using, right? So do you have efficient generation and do you have the right fuel mix? Coal is a very cheap fuel, okay? We use coal here. We use Wyoming coal here at Roadmaker. It gets shipped down by rail and it's used at Roadmaker too. That's very cheap, okay, fuel. Natural gas, not as cheap. Nuclear is pretty cheap fuel. But if you look at natural gas, if you don't have an efficient unit, like a combined cycle gas unit, you don't get the heat rates that you need for efficiency. And so if you have an inefficient fleet, and I would argue, I don't know what the heat rates are for Alexandria, we have DG Hunter, and we have the Bayou Cove assets down south in Jennings. I don't know what those heat rates are. The city doesn't share that. They say it's proprietary. Most people in the industry are going to know what those heat rates are. I'm just not that connected, but I could probably make some calls and try to find out what those heat rates are. But if those heat rates aren't efficient, then you can't generate electricity cheap enough. And so it's cheaper to buy from the market. So one of the things about Alexandria is we're not typically generating our own power. We don't use our own assets to generate our power. We buy power from somebody else. Now, we buy it, but ultimately we pay Cleco to do the resource coordination for us. And resource coordination, so each of these power plants is a resource, okay? Resource power plant here, this power plant over here is another resource. That forms your dispatch stack. And so there's people right now at Cleco who are going through, that they're looking at what's going on. And I would think today that the loads, it's nighttime, so the load's coming down. Okay, and so they may have to cut back on generation. They may have to cut back on the purchases that they're making to cover for whatever the load is. So I kind of rambled there, but resource coordination is what it determines what generation assets you dispatch. And if your generation assets are not efficient enough, you're always buying from the market. And so that's why fuel costs can get out of hand.
Okay. Residents keep asking, as we're looking at the comments and everything, but one of the things that keep coming across is that thing called fuel costs or energy cost adjustments line on our bills. Can you explain that plain and simple?
Let's try to give it a go. Before the 1970s, which we had the quote unquote energy crisis of the 1970s, you and I are old enough to remember that. I remember, at least on TV, seeing lines of cars waiting to get that's motor fuel. Well, that energy crisis affected utilities. It affected the cost of all energy, and so that includes natural gas, right? And so you did not have any fuel cost adjustments prior to the 70s. But when you had large fluctuations in the fuel cost, the utilities came back to the public service commissions and were complaining that they were losing a lot of money. And so they said, look, we would like to pass that fuel cost along. Whatever we're paying for fuel, we want to pass it on. So we have our base rate, okay? And let's back up. There's two basic rates on the Alexandria bill, and there's two basic rates on everybody's bill. That's that base rate, and then that's the fuel rate, okay? And right now, the base rate is like this big, right? And the fuel is always this big. And so the base rate is what you would expect to pay for the facilities that you have. So the base rate, when you see that charge, that's for the distribution lines. That's for the power plants that we have. That base rate supports those assets, and it would even support the debt to pay for those assets. The fuel cost, again, is a passing on of buying that fuel. But a lot of people now call it an energy cost adjustment because it's not just about buying fuel. A lot of times you're buying replacement power because of what I just went through a minute ago. When you go through the resource coordination, you have your dispatch stack, and you're always dispatching your most efficient asset down here. And as power demand goes up, you start moving up that dispatch stack or down the dispatch stack, and you get to your less efficient assets. Well, you're always going to buy from the market if power is available, if your generation is not efficient enough to beat the market. And so that's where the term energy cost adjustment, that we use the terms interchangeably, fuel and energy. But I would argue to you, Jack, that probably of the fuel cost is purchase power. It's not fuel, it's replacement power that we don't generate, that we buy from somebody else.
Okay, so all right, so in this thing called fuel, I have a couple of follow-up questions behind it. A lot of people think it's just the cost of the fuel, but it's also other things, because if you look at the code here in ELEC, they have other things added into fuel supplement, and that particular line is kind of gray because it looks like other stuff could be added into that fuel supplement. Are there ways to find out what fuel supplements are that energy cost adjustment really is?
Yeah, through public records request. Well, I mean, I guess you could go to a council meeting, although the last few times I've been, I wasn't allowed to ask questions, right? But
right.
You could ask your councilman. I guess that would be the first thing to do, would be to ask a councilman. I guess you could ask the Cure Commission. But an audit could be done. You could audit those rates if the council wouldn't listen to you and the Cure Commission wouldn't listen to you. You could do a public records request to get this information. I've done that in the past. I've gotten this information from public records requests, and now that was like 13 years ago. I haven't done it recently, but there would be a way to look at this.
It would be. Well, I think that's one of the biggest elephants in the room right now is that thing called fuel energy cost adjustment. For lack of better words, fuel adjustments. But
Well, and you asked, I don't know if I answered you, okay, but you asked, is it strictly fuel, right?
Right.
And it's
Right.
not strictly fuel. It's not strictly fuel, and you can see that. So anybody who would go and look at the report, I don't know if you put it up on the website, right?
Right.
Anybody can go and look at it. And Exhibit C, Exhibits A and B were not included. Okay, they were Excel spreadsheets that the city wouldn't give us. But
Right.
Exhibit C, page 50. So Exhibit C is basically a printout of all the rates, the city utility rates. And on page 5, I'm just picking one of them. It's duplicated throughout, but the energy cost adjustment, okay, monthly rates charged for metered sales will be increased or decreased 1.1 for each cent per kilowatt hour. Okay. The problem I have with this, and I would love somebody from the city to explain this to us, is I don't know why that's not a 1-for-1. I don't know why it says increased or decreased, but I don't know when the fuel cost adjustment is going to be decreased, right? So I don't know why for every penny it's not penny for penny, but it's a penny and a tenth for every penny. That's the one question I have. The second question is on E4, it says here 1/12 of any generation asset debt service payable in the current fiscal year. Okay, so they're including what is it? Okay, what is debt service? Debt service is when you pay somebody like for your mortgage. Okay, that's debt service. So all those payments on the bonds that we have on the utility, that's collected through the fuel cost adjustment. I've never seen that before. That's a base rate function. You would collect this in the base rate. So that's one of the reasons that the fuel cost is so high, is because instead of using the base rate to pay off the debts for those assets, they're using this fuel. They're using the fuel cost adjustment to collect the debt service.
Or some kind of a wow. So you're saying that the bonds that we put out there potentially are embedded in the fuel, in the energy cost adjustment line item, and that's one of the issues there. In the private industry, there are watchdog groups that watch what private companies like Cleco Energy and SWEPCO and some of those other companies. Is there any watchdog group that's watching what municipalities are doing?
No, this is one, right? I would argue the interactions. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't say anything. I think it's a little feedback.
I would argue that the interaction between you and your councilman and the councilman and the mayor is that, frankly, I hope people understand. I like the fact that Alexandria has a utility. The LPSC, not that this needs to be an argument about the LPSC, but Cleco's rates are very high. Okay, I'm not here to talk about Cleco's rates, but that monitoring process that the 5 commissioners do at the LPSC is not working very well, because we've seen large rate increases throughout the state. So it's not as though that we need another oversight committee. We just need to be more active with some of the questions. And I hope tonight is an example where people can say, why don't you have a 1-for-1 ratio on the fuel cost? Why do you have debt service in the fuel cost? Why are you transferring $10.3 million into the general fund from the utilities? Or if you're going to do that, then can we focus on what the general fund looks like? I think it's actually a good thing, and I support Alexandria. One of the reasons that I'm talking is I want us to have that utility. I want us to keep. It gives us an opportunity to actually save money and not have to go through an LPSC commissioner, which again has not been very effective.
Hey, Patrick, are you still there? You kind of froze. Hey, Patrick. The last thing we heard.
Come again.
Yeah, the last thing we heard you say was that you actually like, the idea that the city of Alexandria owns its utility system.
I do, and I would like to keep it that way. And I'm hoping that we're making decisions that secure that future for the city. The generation portfolio is a question. We don't know if we're making the right decisions that will have a future utility. We had the hack that caused a lot of problems. Some people have said that the city energy utilities are better than somebody else's. There, but okay. So it's a public utility, and it's not supposed to have profit built into it. But it seems like some of that I'm trying to enlighten people about.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go over here, Patrick. I'm going to put our questions on hold. There was a couple of there was one question: which utility rates are they recommending to raise? Gas, water, sewage? But I think it was all of them were. I think the answer to that question was all. I know we're focusing only on the electrical, but from what I initially read, I think it's all of the utilities that they're proposing an increase. Would you agree with that? Hey, Patrick. We are having some.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
The gas and the water and the sewage, but they're looking.
I think we're having some communication issues there, Patrick. Are you still there?
I'm good. I can hear you.
You can hear me now? Okay, all right. But I think the answer to that question was yes. It's all of them that they're proposing to increase, right? I think we lost.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it would make sense that you would look at all of them together. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You lost me?
All right. Yeah, I'm here. I was just panning through some of we were getting quite a few questions out here. So some of them are folk out there answering the questions. So I was just looking through it to make sure we didn't. So we're gonna keep on moving. So some folk feel that the line is I think you answered that question about the line charges being something that's on transmission as opposed to what we are experiencing here. The base rate is set by the council in open debate. But the ECA or fuel adjustment is adjusted monthly with little public explanation. Doesn't that make it kind of a? I'm gonna throw this at you. Doesn't that make it kind of like a little backdoor way to raise the bills without any kind of oversight? What's your thoughts about that?
Oh, sure. I mean, it would be worth an audit, right? Who knows what gets slipped in there? I'm not saying that anything is. We do know again that debt service is collected through fuel. Mm-hmm. So we've been told that it's just a pass through of costs, which I mean debt service is a cost, but it was a pass through of fuel costs, but it's got debt service in it. But you could throw other things in there, and part of the problem I have too is at some point, I think it was about 10, 15 years ago, David Crutchfield made the decision to have a 6-month period. That's a pretty rare deal. Typically, your fuel cost is 2 months in arrears, where you're always paying for fuel or paying for power, and you hope to get it recovered from the ratepayer, from the customer, within 60 days. Okay. Well, when fuel cost was going up, or when prices were going up, David wanted to spread it out like over 6 months to smooth that rise, right? And so I don't like it from the perspective that you're dealing now. Now think about this. Every calculation that's done, you're dealing with 6 months of data, right? So how easy would that be to screw up, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a concern. So no, I mean, maybe they're better than me. Maybe they've never made a mistake dealing with 6 months of data, but that's a lot of data. It's complex.
It really is. And when we talk about this, if the enterprise funds that we have and the utility is an enterprise fund, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then we have the internal finances of the city itself, right?
Right.
It seems, and it's quite a bit of money that's passing through over on the utility side, but you don't see a lot of those transactions getting approval in typical council meeting. You do see replacements for things like the spark plugs in those Warzilla engines or what have you. You see um, stuff for transformers and meters and things of that nature, but you don't see the approval of like tons of stuff like going out to this this attorney who specializes in utilities and the day-to-day to that. You don't see, so it's quite a bit of money that you just don't see. It's like it's all hidden back in this little secretive compartment, but yet and still, and it doesn't seem like the council has any oversight on it. What's your thoughts about that? It looked like, to me, it looked like we ought to have two different businesses. We ought to have some people over here in this accounting, dealing with the accounting of the utility system, and then you need something over here as a check and balance. But it looked like it's too many places for things to happen, interesting things to happen.
Yeah, I guess the question becomes, now that power markets are so complex, I guess if you go back in time, I mean, I wasn't in Alexandria, in 1960, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when DG Hunter was first developed, it was just a power plant that you ran and it powered things. And that's probably pretty easy to look at from a city council perspective.
Mm-hmm.
When you get into questions of resource coordination, what is your dispatch stack? What's the efficiency of your power plant compared to what else is out there? It's an entire business. And we have 7 councilmen, but are 7 councilmen qualified to ask those questions, or do they just defer to experts, right? And are the experts capable? Are they cronies of somebody? It's a good question to ask whether or not there's a better way to set it up. Now, Lafayette has its own utility system, but it's its own. It was created by the Alexandria is part of LIPA, which was created by the legislature, but Lafayette is the Lafayette Power Authority. Okay, so it exists by itself outside of the city, and it's run more like a business in Lafayette.
So in Lafayette, that the LUS in Lafayette, although it's kind of like it's owned by the city, it's kind of like a completely separate entity from the city.
Yes, and it was created by the legislature. I guess if you wanted to do something like that, you'd have to get the legislature involved. But it is a different setup, and Lafayette has, a lot of people consider it to be a leading utility. They do things there. I'm not sure if Terry Hooval is still running it, but he was a Entergy executive, and he just wanted to come back to his hometown, and he got very aggressive with the utility. And for instance, they were a big reason that fiber.
We're losing you.
Lafayette, a decade.
Hey, Patrick, we kind of
Yeah.
lost. We kind of had some lagging, and we didn't hear what you said about the Lafayette utility system.
It's pretty aggressive. It's considered a leader. They've done a lot of work. For instance, like when AT&T wouldn't bring the fiber in 15 years ago,
Hmm.
Lafayette Utility System said, "We'll do it," right? And they went after it. And now, because they were a first mover, AT&T is doing it too. So you have a choice. You know, and there may be more than just those two, but um, they haven't they haven't rested on their laurels in Lafayette.
Okay. Well, the interesting thing is both of the cities, they both have their own municipal utility system, right? But it appeared that the Lafayette system is not, the city of Lafayette is not as dependent on that system as the city of Alexandria is dependent on AUS. Is that a true statement?
I'm not comfortable without delving into it. I do think there are some in lieu of taxes that LUS may pay Lafayette. That I'm not comfortable speaking on that without looking into it further.
Okay. All right. If in your opinion, if a resident, really pushed the issue of, what is fuel supplement or ACA and how is it calculated, what do you recommend they do?
I would call your councilman, right, and try to get answers from your councilman. I mean, because most people aren't going to feel comfortable putting a public records request together, and you shouldn't have to do it with the public records request. For me, it generally takes that form with the city. But I would say talk to your councilman and, and ask them, what do you know about the fuel cost? Well, why is the debt service included in the fuel cost? You know, it's fuel costs. So why is debt service in there? I think even Delta Consultants would say debt service should not be in the fuel cost. Um, I would ask them to contact their councilman and ask, or councilwoman, and ask why why are these charges this way? Why are there transfers out of here? Why is $9 or $10 million transferred out of the utility system? And do you know about that? And specifically with the fuel cost, you know, how often is it audited? I mean, that you could audit it.
Many residents are saying the city depends, what we are hearing anyway. Many residents are saying that the city depends way too heavily on utility profits or earning after those expenses have been paid um, to fund things like the buses, the parks, city hall overhead. How much of the budget, and I know we've kind of talked about that, but how much of the city's actual budget really depend on it? And if those things were to kind of like go away, like one of the, and I guess I'm gonna step back a little bit. The Cure is saying that, one of the reasons why we need to increase the rates are because, we have maintenance that we need to do. We have, you know, all kinds of, upkeep and different things like that that we need to do with the utility system. But given the fact that the utility systems appear to be a standalone all by itself, and if we weren't moving the dollars away from the fund itself, would we not have the ability to take care of that upkeep as it stands? Because if so, we would need to, step in and do an increase at this time, if the monies were staying there.
Yeah, so again, just isolated on the electrical study. Um, the Delta Consultants said that $9.5 million should be raised more. Another $9.5 million is required annually. Again, the city is transferring more than that out of the utility fund now. So what I would argue is that's needed if you didn't transfer it out.
You kind of faded
you heard
out.
That last part?
No, we didn't.
Well, let me try it again. So what I would say is so the Delta consultants said that Delta consultants said that an additional 9.5 million should be raised just for the electrical side, but you're transferring more than 9.5 million out right now. So I would say if you weren't transferring that money out, that the utility has the money to do what it needs to do, according to what Delta said. I'm just going by Delta's numbers.
Mm-hmm. All right, and you could do what you needed to do. So then, if that was the case, you've been in, in this accounting world for a long time. What other ways, if we were to throttle back on what was being transferred from the utility fund over to the general fund, what other ways could we compensate and have the monies to do what we need to do from the general fund? What could we do there to because right now we would be at a loss and the city would be hurting. And so you and I both agree that we can't get rid of the utility system or anything like that. But on the same token, what could we be doing differently in the city itself to slow down our spending?
Yeah, good point. I mean, there are other sources of income for the city. Sales tax is one, property tax is another. I think those are the other big two. So, and there's probably fees, but those are pretty small. Now, I don't like taxes, so I don't want to raise any taxes. But there are other avenues other than the utility system, and I think the utility system is like a cookie jar that allows the local political community not to disclose what they're doing, right? So you can suppress the property taxes and the sales taxes, but you got this cookie jar that's the utility fund, and so then you can buy votes with whatever other programs you want to offer. So that's kind of the way I look at it. But there, as I said, there are other avenues, other sources of income, sales tax and property taxes being the most obvious. It goes without saying, though, is the budget too big, right? Can we tighten our belts? I mean, that's a question. I don't ever hear anyone talking about tightening belts. I don't hear anyone talking about saving money. I'd like to hear that.
So in essence, you are, if we just talk about saving money, we could be talking about things like procurement, the way we buy stuff. We're making sure we're getting the better deal as opposed to doing it the way we've been doing it, for the last 20 or 30 years, or cutting back on some of the ancillary services that we are offering, and different things of that. So just looking at efficiencies are ways that we can cut back on our dependence and what we really need. So those are other ways.
Yeah, but that's an excellent point. I would add that you just on the utility side, that purchasing is a big issue. We kind of glossed over resource coordination. And with some of the connection issues we're having, I don't know if I want to get into a detailed conversation about resource coordination, but Cleco used to do the resource coordination for the city. Cleco still does the resource coordination for the city. So I'm not here to allege that anything went wrong, but the same systems are in place now with Cleco as were in place when Jacques came in and said Cleco was cheating us, right? And that there was a lawsuit. So I don't know why we didn't make a change or institute some other controls that would tell us that we know that our competitor is not doing a poor job of purchasing and giving us lowest cost power. Again, I'm not making any accusations, but you have a conflict of interest when you have Cleco doing your resource coordination when you could easily have someone else do it.
A third party that's actually looking out for our best interests, and or someone or qualified staff members within the city itself, right?
Yeah, we actually talked in 09 with the city about doing resource coordination then for the city. And I actually told them, and look, a lot of things were said about me back then. I didn't need to do it. I thought it would be a good idea. And we had a lot of ex-Cleco employees who were Alexandria citizens who were interested in doing its own resource coordination desk for the city. A lot of negative things got said about us. That's fine. We went on back and did other things. Now a few of those people aren't with us anymore. But the city could do it itself. In that meeting, just to avoid the appearance that we were talking our own book, I gave them a name of another party that they could use. And the city went out and hired that party. I did a public records request after that. And I can tell you, those records probably aren't still available, but this is back in 2010. The group that the city hired on my recommendation was buying power 2/3 to 1/3 the cost of what Cleco was selling power to the city of Alexandria. So is that still possible today? I'm not saying that. That's what I saw back then. And when you have someone who doesn't have a conflict of interest, you might get better results.
If not utilities, if not the utilities, what other sources of? I guess I want to go back down into those other things, and I think you and I both agree. You know, we don't want to see sales tax go up. We don't want to see property tax go up. But what we can do, you know, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, if we were making Alexandria attractive for folk to come here and different things of that nature, effectively we would be increasing our sales tax. So we now are not sending them up higher, but we're what, for lack of a better word, we got a greater volume of, you know, people going to the mall, going to the shop, and different things of that nature. And so people are now buying and they're contributing those taxes that way. But the rate is still the same, but the city would then benefit the revenue. The same thing could be said with if we had people that were working and buying homes, they would be paying property taxes, and, you know, property going up. And so it's not like we're increasing the property taxes or anything, but because we have people coming in, we have more people sharing the wealth that way, or the resources that way.
Yeah, you kind of cut out a little bit, but I think I got most of what you're saying. That's the rising tide lifts all boats, right? When you have when you have economic growth. And look, we hear a lot about economic development. I like economic growth, right? I don't know. Did anyone know what Facebook would be? I mean, is a government bureaucrat going to know what the next hot thing is going to be? Would a government bureaucrat have taken a chance on the internet? I don't know. That's for the market to decide. But part of the problem that we have in Alec is we do have a declining tax base. There are people that we've had out migration. Woodworth has picked up a lot of Alexandria people. I know people who won't live here. You know, I mean, we're here tonight to talk about utilities, but because this is a city wrapped around a utility, and because the utility subsidizes much of the activity here, it is all connected, right? And because you've had out migration, you've lost property taxes. You know, people probably use the internet or they go to Lafayette, and so you're losing sales taxes. We need to ask ourselves, are we attractive, right? Is Alexandria an attractive place? And I run into a lot of people, I'll be honest with you, a lot of people complain about Alexandria or say they're ready to get out. I'm here, I'm not moving. I have no plans to move, but the city should really ask itself, is it easy to do business here? That's the other thing I hear all the time is people say it's very difficult to do business here.
Right. You know, and we hear the same thing on our side. You know, people talking about, hey, I'm moving out. I'm going to try something different and different things of that nature. But that also would mean to keep them here. That would also mean that government would have to sit back and say, hey, Alexandria, we are open for growth. You know, we got a new sign on the window that say we're open to grow. And that way, that would also suggest that when you do have people, even the locals who are trying to do various things, you know, it becomes an attitude of what it's going to take to make it happen, other than an attitude of you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. You know, and what you end up with is, you know, a city that's dying. I mean, you take for example, half of the city of Alexandria. If you take West Alexandria, take East Alexandria is almost offline. You know what I mean, from a economic standpoint. So that means that basically all your sales tax base is coming from West Alexandria for the most part. Yeah, we got a little overlap right here in the, you know, in the middle, but take MacArthur Drive and be the next north south boundary, and East Alexandria is turned off. You know, it's turned off for tax collection, so to say. So, from an accounting standpoint, what would you say about that? You know, let's turn Alexandria on as opposed to trying to figure out ways to turn it off. What's your thoughts about that?
I would love it. I think it's a fresh idea. Who else is saying that, right? So earlier I argued I don't ever hear anybody talking about tightening the budget, like a smaller government, right? Again, is it government's job to provide festivals, right? So if someone were interested to create an economic zone where maybe there would be no taxes or less taxes, that would be a good thing.
That would be a good
that. Yeah, well, I mean, look, Government Street, right? Government Street was, I forget who put that together, but there was basically, I thought it was a federal initiative. I'm talking about like 30, 40 years ago. And that's why you had all those businesses going on the Government Street was, you know, there was an incentive to go. It was, I think it was no taxes or something like that. But there was an incentive to locate there. And so you ended up with a post office there. You ended up with the IRS there. It's closed now. I think it's closing. But years ago, there was an incentive to build along there, and they went for it. You know, businesses and people respond to incentives. So when you start raising taxes or something becomes more expensive, people will find they'll vote with their dollars and their feet, and they'll go somewhere else. I don't know if you remember it. That reminded me of the story of the Town Talk used to always print stories about how glowing the utility was, but it was odd because it's somewhere in the mid-teens. They closed the Town Talk print shop here, and they moved it to Blackford or Lake Charles. I can't remember which one. But their utility costs here were too high. I don't know if you remember that. I wish I had that story. I do remember that. So we don't have the Town Talk printed here allegedly because the utilities were too high back in the day. That's what they said.
That's what they said. Finally, my last question for you this evening, and Patrick, we're going to definitely have to get you back on to talk about you know, the resource coordination, because that piece of the pie, you know, if we can, you know, I know, and you know, our leadership, you know, currently it's saying that nothing's going to be changed. We just, the only solution for us to move forward and the utility system don't collapse is to raise the rates. But it seems like, you know, just conversating with you tonight, there are other things that could be done to you know, to maybe not change them as high or whatever, or give us a little wiggle room to get something worked out. But it seems like it's some stones that we can turn over or try to turn over, and they could help us without, going back into the pockets. Because I tell you, when you think about it, I know last year and year before last, there were, and especially last year, there were tons of people, that live in East Alexandria or Southeast Alexandria. They were living on a fixed income, and their utilities were more expensive than that, um, than what they were bringing in, and so that meant almost every single dime, every single copper cent was going to fill a need that the city had. And a lot of people, say, hey, you use the energy, you got to pay for it. That's fine and dandy. But when you are a city that's experiencing poverty at 250% plus the national average, we got some problems here. You understand? And so we got some social issues that are going on as well. And it don't look like the way in which we kind of handled that stuff. There were a lot of people last year that were really hurting, and that's real. That's not in somebody's head. That's real. And as a city, we got to take those kind of things, especially if we're depending from a city standpoint on those earnings after the expenses are paid or the profits. We've got to think about what this model of what we are doing, how it is actually impacting the people that we were elected to serve. You understand what I'm saying there? And that's real. I mean, when you have people who are literally, they can't buy their medicine, or are they making the choice to drive without insurance, or not paying for their home insurance because they're trying to stay cool? That's real. And our leaders need to take that into consideration, especially if if we can turn the city on and start attracting people into the community and grow our tax bases, and things of that nature. A final thought here, Patrick, before we get out, is what would you consider a fair and transparent billing system? One that looks like what's going on in some places. It appeared that we got the money to invest in our utility system and bring it up to date, because my understanding and even my assessment of this concept in the utility system where you pay by credit card or a debit card, and it's more of a batch system. That seems like 1991 technology to me. And it seems like even in our system, our back office system that we're using, it seems like a ton of stuff could be done there to improve efficiencies as well. Just trying to figure out stuff coming from an IT arena and trying to see consistency. There was no consistency. I mean, especially if you were one of them persons that were challenged with making the payments. If you were, in that minority of the 30% who could pay their utility bill, you had no problem. You probably sat back and you said, there are no issues. But those other folk were really experiencing serious issues. What would you say about this billing system? What could we do to improve the financial systems and the financial operational systems over within the utility part of the system as a whole? What's the thoughts there?
Well, one, I don't know why the utility, you go back to the hack, and I mean, there's a third party that does IT for the city, Kinetics, right? So I think they're responsible for the city's firewall. Mm-hmm. They did that before the hack. They did after the hack. I never heard Kinetics mentioned in any of that talk when there was a hack, right? So, this gets into the question of who's accountable when something goes wrong. I only mention that because I don't know why the utility billing system was even wasn't ring fenced. I don't know why it wasn't air gap. That's the term that they use, right? Why it wasn't air gap between everything else, and that created so many problems that summer. That once this hack occurred, it was all lost. And I think there were tapes that it took them a certain amount of time to get that billing history back up to speed. But I don't know that they need a new system. I think they need better procedures and better IT. And if you're using a third party and it's not working out, then I would start looking for a different third party, which kind of comes back to what you and I talked about a minute ago, is purchasing, right? Are you buying the cheapest power? Do you have the right people to buy the cheapest power? Or is it a conflict of interest? Or are there political influences behind who's getting paid, right? Those are all questions that swirl around this whole idea of should we be paying more for utilities? And when it comes to the billing system, it's probably okay. I don't understand why it was hackable. It should have been air gapped or ring fenced, and that I think led to a lot of problems here.
And what you were referring to there with air gapped or ring fenced is there should have been a separation between our utility systems and and just general networks and things of that nature. Yeah, that was obvious.
Absolutely.
And yeah, those were and the idea of having a third party in an IT arena. Organizations bring in third parties to do work all the time, but typically you're going to have oversight, somebody on staff within the IT arena that's actually monitoring the work that these guys are doing and auditing the work that they're doing as well. I mean, I know the years that I spent in that arena. We had professional auditing firms that came in and made sure we had those kind of things in place and that kind of stuff. And the crazy thing about that, there's been no adequate explanation as to what the fixes to the problem were. So we don't even know if we're still sitting ducks, for yet another attack, because no explanation. I said adequate about, in my opinion, none. And I do believe, that there's a certain level of accountability that could have been said from an IT perspective, that you would not have compromised any of the internals of the organization that would have given the public just the general feel that, hey, we are now protected.
Absolutely. I brought it up because when you talk about billing, it's the first thing that came to my mind, and I don't think that we ever did get a valid explanation. And I mentioned a third party contractor. It may be that there's also situations where third party contractors recommend things and they're told no. So it doesn't have to be the third party contractor, but it would be nice. Again, it would be nice to know what was the precipitating event. Does no one know? I mean, they have log, or they should have logs of that firewall and what was going on, and they should be able to tell. You should be able to. I don't do IT forensics, right? But there are people who do, and you should have been able to tell what the breach was. And I'm very curious who the breach was. That would be good to know after all this trouble. I mean, you see what people went through with these bills, and then that Project Restore came along. It would be nice to know. Did someone download the wrong thing from the internet? Did someone bring a USB stick in and put it in the wrong whatever? A lot of questions were never answered.
Never answered. Right. And forensically, you should have been able to, to pinpoint it relatively accurate, and then also be able to tell it to the public, and then reassure the public that we got this, quote unquote. We've made these measures, but crickets on that angle.
Well, in fact, to your point, they went into closed door executive session and said that it was, and it's one of the things that you can go into executive session about. So it's one of those things that you now say, this is too important to talk about. We can't talk about it. We can only talk about it behind closed doors. So they use that as an opportunity to get outside of the public sphere.
Well, I mean, they use it. I think they exploited it. If you ask me about it, and that's my opinion about it because I come from that world, and I mean, AT&T is down. AT&T will tell you they split a cable, and here's what we're doing to rectify it. You go to Target, and we have a security breach, and Target tells you exactly what kind of a security breach, how it happened, and different things of that nature. What difference are we here? Are we, I don't know the exact things that Target or whatever company, AT&T or whomever was the last person that was hacked. They don't tell me exactly, but they do give me an assurance that it's not going to happen again, to build that confidence that I'm coming back over here and spending money with them again. You know what I mean? Um, and IT is something that it grows that way. But I think we take things, sometimes a tad bit far here with hardened information that in other environments and other government agencies, they are free to tell that information. So I think that's just something that's just it's part of the culture here. They don't need to know. They can't understand it or something. I'm just trying to figure it out. Patrick, before we get out of here, did you have anything else you'd like to, that we didn't cover that you think folk need to know about?
No, I mean, I think there are more that we could talk about. Resource coordination would be huge, right? So if there's a demand for it, we could talk again. But people may not want to have a second session. I did want to say I appreciate you providing the forum, Jack. If you weren't doing this, I don't know who else would be doing it. And it's nice to have a platform. I gave an interview to KELB about 2 or 3 months ago, and it never saw the light of day. So it's nice if you aren't here. I couldn't talk about this subject in public. So I appreciate it.
Oh no, man, that's what we're here for, because we firmly believe that we can only get better. It's almost kind of like when you go to AA. My name is Jack and I'm an alcoholic, and I want to stop drinking. Until we admit we have some issues, and it's okay to go ahead and admit we have some issues, and lay the ground game to move us forward. It's okay. It really is okay. And so we're trying to have those conversations and different things of that nature. So we want to thank you, Patrick, for just coming and helping to shed lights on it. Because I tell you, when we put stuff out about things that the community just don't understand about the utility system, you can clearly tell that many people in our community are completely out of touch, don't know, but they want to know. And I think, honestly, just listening to the public knows just how important the utility system is for us. And so we're not asking for nobody to give us anything. We just want it to be run optimally. You know what I mean? And I think I feel that same way my own self. And so we just glad we have folk like you that's willing to say, hey, I want to share my knowledge about this thing with the public. And and the other thing, Patrick, I'll say this right now, and to the folk over at the city, both to the mayors and his staff, to the council and the staff right there. If you guys feel that, if you feel you need to have a conversation, our platform is open to you. If you have something going on and you want to communicate it, just give us a call and let us know, because it's open to you. Because until we all lay out all of the issues, and they may have some other views as to the reason why they're doing things, but it's always good to let's just sit down and civilly talk about it, and so we can move the whole community forward. So that offer is open to you out there, Mr. Mayor. Anytime you feel you want to come and sit down and have a conversation with the community, just give us a call, and we'll make it happen. Patrick, with that said, man, again, I want to thank you for helping us sort through some of this stuff tonight. And to our viewers, this is what civic engagement looked like. Asking the tough questions, demanding clarity, and learning the facts together. At UrbanCast, we are committed to supporting the community. If you are a nonprofit organization out there or a school without a marketing budget, we are here to help you get your message out. If your organization do have a marketing budget, we encourage you to include UrbanCast in your plans upfront. Your support allows us to lift up groups who don't have these resources. And together we can build a stronger Alexandria. We want to thank our followers out there, the supporters, and especially our, partners, Sadler's Towing, Long's Product, Legendary Kung Fu and Tai Chi, and the United Wrestling Entertainment organization for helping us make these conversations possible. Keep commenting, liking, and sharing this broadcast. The more voices we bring to the table, the stronger our community is going to be. Again, Patrick, thank you, man. I'm going to go ahead and y'all have a great evening.
Appreciate it, Jack.
Yeah, hold on one second, Patrick, and I'm going to go ahead and.
Hey, did you know Long's Products is a family-owned janitorial supply with mops, brooms, trash bags, and they even have food service disposables, carry-out plates, and to-goes? Check us out.